before me. Deploy! Deploy!
See, here's the thing. I don't need to tell you that I love Iron Man, because I think it's pretty obvious that I love Iron Man just by looking at me. Which, you know, some of you have never seen my face before, so hi, here, this is what I look like. And I think it's pretty obvious that I have
Patterned my whole look
after Tony Stark. And, you know, I am the frontrunner of Chimera Films, and typically the one who
pay for everything and design everything and make everyone look cooler.
So I guess you could say, you know, metaphorically speaking, that Episode 2 of my MCU character study series that I still need to come up with a name for, like a good name. If you don't know, this is a series where I do mid-length character studies on some of my favorite MCU characters, starting with the original 6 Avengers, and I'll be expanding to more characters in 2024. The playlist for these will be linked below, but by all means, watch this video first, I'm sure you'll still enjoy it. So, to say that Tony Stark is the most important character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe would be a nearly unmatchable understatement. Iron Man was the introduction, the foundation upon which the MCU was built, both tonally and narratively. While Marvel Studios has pulled some of the wrong lessons from Iron Man, like making everyone super quippy all the time and putting together certain aspects of their movies in post-production rather than pre-production, I think some of it had value. And you could almost always tell how the MCU was doing based on Tony's status. Appearing into a landscape that had never seen anything like this before, and being gradually teased with the introduction of plenty more to come, generally just having fun and enjoying the ride, embracing complexity and making some necessary changes that affected things for both the best and worst, and finally, at once both the most powerful and most vulnerable they've ever been. Tony Stark is the MCU in a lot of ways, and that's easily one of the most apparent but least talked about. The other way is that Tony's personality, the way he was written, has kind of affected everyone. People who criticize the MCU like to say that all the heroes are the same, and I mostly disagree. I think there's a pretty big gap in personalities from Mark Spector to Shuri to Rocket Raccoon to Steve Rogers. But I will say that a lot of the later stage MCU characters can feel derivative of Tony in some way or another. Everyone's a super genius. Everyone gets a nanotech suit. Everyone quips. So sure, maybe not the best case scenario, but Iron Man was the seed. The tree that we have gotten has been carefully and sometimes carelessly trimmed and shaped over the past 15 years, but it all comes from and branches out from that same seed. Tony Stark is the foundation upon which every MCU protagonist is built, and while that may feel a little old hat now, I think it's part of the MCU's success story. I think the goggles of nostalgia have kind of blinded us to Tony's actual character. A lot of us remember the smartass, the Whedonisms, the
Shakespeare in the Park?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
It means get lost, Squidward.
That man has no regard for lawn maintenance.
So you can count on me to pleasure myself.
But I think the way he gets handled in the later films, especially in regard to the humor, is really interesting. Tony's jokes in the first movie are a sign of arrogance that evolve into more of a sort of dry sarcasm. If anything, Tony in Iron Man 1 is pretty serious after the cave stuff, at least in relation to the other movies. And, much like Steve, the core ideas of Tony's character arc over the course of the franchise are set up in this first movie. Tony learns how to be more selfless, but how much more can he extend that? How much is he willing to let go of for the greater good? Tony learns to establish peace through his ingenuity and his resilience, but will those traits allow him to support the weight of an entire universe crashing down around him? Iron Man 2 tests these ideas further by severely regressing Tony's character, and you can kind of take it or leave it on whether or not that works for you. The first 2 Avengers movies don't really matter because Joss Whedon has no idea how to write these characters beyond the surface level and borderline character assassination, so we're not talking about that. Iron Man 3 does do something interesting by confronting Tony's place in the universe. We joke now about how far the MCU has come, going from arms dealer makes metal suit to fight terrorists to so Doctor Strange's spell breaks the universe and all the Spider-Mans team up to fight all the villains from the previous movies. But honestly, the jump from the scale of Iron Man 1 to Avengers 1 is still pretty considerable. But Iron Man 3 chooses to acknowledge this absurdity and have it directly reflect Tony's character arc. The man in the metal suit doesn't seem to have a leg to stand on in the face of a literal cosmic apocalypse, and that weighs on him. That's even shown more in Civil War. God, I love the character writing in Civil War, because it's a movie composed of imperfect calls. Make no mistake, Tony is the antagonist of this movie, or at least one of them. He is difficult by design, and that's okay. I mean, it's not okay for him, he is becoming a little bit of a fascist here, but it sticks to the arc. That ingenuity and resilience, those traits you relied on so heavily, not only are they not enough anymore, from your perspective they're getting people killed. So why wouldn't you seek some guidance, someone to save everyone else from you and save you from yourself? And if it happened to you, surely it'll happen to everyone else. Tony's jokes aren't said with as much bravado anymore. He's just masking pain, coping with the nightmare that is the impending doom of the Avengers and the part he has to play in it. And then what he sees comes to pass. I think Infinity War is really interesting here. The cracks in Tony's foundation started to really show in Civil War, and this is where everything bursts open. Ever since the Battle of New York, Tony has been driven by an obsession to defend the world from a threat for which he had no name. And since now he has that name, of course we get...
Tell me his name again.
This is it, the one thing all of Tony's failings have built to. If he can stop this one guy, be strong enough to stop the apocalypse he's dreamed about for years, it will all have been worth it. And in the same way that Infinity War and Endgame are a culmination of character development, it feels like a culmination of the many premonitions of Tony Stark.
That's the end game.
We'll lose.
And if you die, I feel like that's on me.
It's taking Tony and making him stronger than he's ever been, because the higher up the mountain you can get, the more it'll hurt when evil space god Grimace sends you tumbling back down. And very understandably, by the time Endgame rolls around, Tony has kinda abandoned Iron Man. He's happy, but in many ways that makes him a shell of his former self. His potential as a husband and a father is being fulfilled at the expense of his potential as a hero, and it's gnawing at him to a point that even Pepper can recognize. And it's that sinking feeling, that sense of immense responsibility to be an Avenger, literally and metaphorically, that drive Tony back to do what he does best. I mentioned earlier how Tony's arc is this test of his willingness to be selfless, and how his resilience and his intelligence act as the main forces behind his capacity to do so. This right here is it. The suit he built, the final form of the first hero, being used as an impromptu Infinity Gauntlet, is the ultimate expression of that ingenuity. Years and years of suffering Tony has gone through have calloused his mind, body, and soul for this very moment. Thanos and Hulk scream in agony when wielding the stones, which I'll remind you is essentially holding the power of the universe in the palm of your hand. Tony barely flinches. And it's that resilience that gives him the drive to make the toughest call of all, the most selfless of all. You always said the why we fight was to end the fight, to go home. And it's at this moment you realize you can't do both. Can't be there for your wife, daughter, adopted son, best friend, and everyone you fought so hard to save and bring back. So Tony has to be the one to lay down on the wire and let everyone crawl over him. It's the perfect end to this character's journey. By the end of that journey, Iron Man has been a lot of things. Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, father, husband, friend, adversary, consultant, Frankenstein, savior, avenger. But in all those steps along that road, one thing remained true.
Truth is,
One thing you can't take away.
I am.
I am.
Tony Stark is Iron Man. And Tony Stark is truly irreplaceable. Special thanks to my buddies Omar, Christian, and Deverick for donating to the $10 tier on my Patreon. If you really want to help me be on my Iron Man shit and build something with this channel, then head on over to my Patreon. The link is in the description. For as little as $3 a month, you can get exclusive benefits, such as access to videos early, exclusive reviews, and lots of other really cool stuff, and I really, really appreciate it. It really helps me out.